You've probably heard all the buzz about Texas. Things like no state income tax, a booming oil and gas industry, and a wave of technology jobs that turned quiet suburban areas into the envy of cities all over. For ages, buying a house here felt like a sure bet, like winning the lottery. But what happens when that dream starts to look shaky? Well, we're starting to see it. For sale signs aren't just popping up here and there. They're multiplying. They linger on front lawns for weeks, sometimes even months. Those price reductions that were once just whispered about at open houses are now front and center in bold on every listing. This isn't just a regular slowdown or a minor correction. In the places we're about to explore, it looks a lot more like a meltdown. Today on Discover the Nation, we're taking a road trip through 10 suburbs where the Texas housing dream is turning into a financial nightmare. These areas skyrocketed too high and too fast. We're seeing an explosion in inventory, buyer interest has dried up, and sellers are really feeling the pressure. The first suburb we're hitting is a spot that, just a year ago, people thought was untouchable. You'll want to stick around for this one. If you own a home in Texas or are even thinking about jumping into this market, this is the briefing you need. Before we dive in, do me a quick favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which suburb worries you the most right now. Ready? Grab your keys. Our first stop is in the bustling heart of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. Number 10 on our list is Frisco. We start off in a town that used to be synonymous with growth. Not long ago, Frisco was the poster child for the booming Dallas-Fort Worth area. Families, sports teams, and big corporations rushed here for great schools, shiny new retail spaces, and endless planned communities. But now, it's become the perfect example of what happens when development goes unchecked. The volume of new construction in Frisco is mind-blowing. If you drive in any direction, you'll see entire neighborhoods with finished streets and completed houses, but there's hardly anyone living there. It feels like a movie set. Recent data from the multiple listing service shows that the number of newly built homes has surged by over 40% in just 6 months, and these aren't custom-built homes. They're mass-produced. It's kind of wild how fast homes were built recently, and now they're just sitting empty. Builders are definitely feeling the heat from the market. Take Frisco, for example. About 1 in 3 listings has already dropped their prices. And we're not talking about small cuts here. They're slashing prices by $50,000 or even $100,000. But even with those huge discounts, prices are still too high for regular folks. The median sales price is way out of reach for most local incomes, especially with mortgage rates where they are right now. In fact, the National Association of Realtors recently pointed out that the affordability index here is at its lowest point in about 20 years. Now, if you bought a house during the crazy market of 2021 or early 2022, you're in a tough spot. People are trying to sell older homes, but those brand new houses come with some pretty sweet deals from builders. These builders are pulling out all the stops, offering interest rate buydowns that get rates into the 4% range and throwing in tons of upgrades and design credits. The traditional resale market is really struggling to keep up. Listings that used to get snatched up over the weekend are now sitting there for a while. In Frisco, houses now take around 75 days to sell, which is hard to believe compared to just a year ago. This is really what happens when a market is overwhelmed with homes. If you own a house in Frisco, that paper value you thought you had, it's fading faster than most people even notice. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Does your street look like this? Next up is McKinney, right next to Frisco. While Frisco is dealing with too many homes, McKinney is caught in a bind with interest rates. You can really see the golden handcuff effect here, and the stress is definitely building. McKinney's story is one of buyers' remorse on a big scale. Recent reports from Zillow show that a lot of homeowners here jumped in during the peak with super low rates around 3%. On paper, it looks like they have great houses, but in reality, many of them are house rich but cash poor. Their monthly payments are taking a bigger bite out of their income than they anticipated, and moving isn't an easy option for them. If they sell and then buy again in the same area, they're looking at much higher loan rates. You know, the housing situation in McKinney is pretty tough right now. It's like the market has turned into a stagnant pond because homes aren't selling like they used to. New constructions aren't popping up as fast as in Frisco, and the existing homes that do hit the market, well, they just sit there. The Texas Real Estate Research Center has pointed out that homes in McKinney are taking over twice as long to sell compared to last year. Average days on the market have jumped by more than 110%. A lot of sellers are still holding on to those prices from 2 years ago when every home sparked a bidding war, but that's just not happening anymore. A recent report from Realtor.com even showed that there's a big gap, over 8%, between what homes are listed for and what they actually sell for. It's a tough conversation for sellers because buyers are asking for big discounts to help deal with those higher interest rates. Sellers are slowly coming to terms with the fact that those old price tags are just a fantasy now. The volume of transactions has dropped nearly 30% from its peak. The homes that really do sell quickly are usually owned by folks who are relocating for work, facing financial issues, or just tired of waiting. Those listings often see price cuts of 10 to 15%. For others, it's just a waiting game, and unfortunately, waiting doesn't pay the bills. McKinney is becoming a place where many homeowners feel stuck in houses they can barely afford, and they can't just leave easily. If that's you, you're definitely not alone. Now, let's talk about Prosper, the next stop on our list. This suburb's name really feels like a promise, doesn't it? In the last market cycle, Prosper was the go-to place for luxury homes. If you wanted a house costing over $1 million on a big lot with all the fancy amenities, that's where you went. But that's also why you see the first signs of trouble here. The slow unraveling of Prosper is really about wealth quietly shrinking. These homes aren't for first-time buyers. They're usually second or third step purchases, what we call move-up homes. But that segment is in a bit of trouble. Move-up buyers used to rely on growing stock portfolios, great bonuses, and tech paychecks. But over the last couple of years, those things have become less dependable. Looking closely at high-end sales data shows that inventory for homes priced above $1.5 million is getting shaky. In Prosper, home prices have shot up by more than 50%. Now, there are tons of big new builds and spec homes just sitting empty, looking for buyers who aren't rushing to make a decision. Local real estate agents are seeing huge price cuts, $200,000, $300,000, even $500,000 off individual listings. This isn't just a little adjustment, it's like a fire sale. Builders who took out big loans to fund these projects are feeling the heat. While the cost of construction materials isn't going up anymore, their loan costs have skyrocketed. They can't afford to keep unsold houses for too long, so they're dropping prices and throwing in amazing incentives. But these price cuts don't just affect the builders, they shake up the value of homes all over the neighborhood. If you bought a $1 million house in Prosper a few years back, you might now see a nearly identical home down the street selling for $750,000. That's a quick way to lose a chunk of your equity on paper, up to $250,000 just like that. On average, luxury homes in Prosper are now sitting on the market for over 100 days. Every month a home doesn't sell means more mortgage payments, property taxes, and insurance costs for a house that's just empty. It's a real meltdown at the high end of the market. Many buyers thought their wealth would protect them here, but Prosper is showing that the higher you go, the harder you can fall. Now let's talk about Anna, another spot in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that's booming. It's up Highway 75 and is one of the fastest growing suburbs in North Texas. But there's a catch. This growth happened before the infrastructure was ready for it. For years, the idea was simple. When prices in places like McKinney, Frisco, and Prosper shot up, buyers just kept heading north until they found a builder who would work with them. Anna seemed like the perfect answer. Unfortunately, reality hit hard. A lot of the town still depends on narrow two-lane country roads, which are now overflowing with traffic thanks to all the new homes. Schools are fitting in temporary classrooms, and even basic errands often mean a drive into neighboring cities. The commute back to Plano or Dallas, which used to be manageable, is now well over an hour for many residents. What seemed like a smart move is turning out to be far more costly in terms of time and money. And then the market changed. Let's talk about some big changes happening in the Texas housing market. It's looking a bit worrisome with a rise in foreclosure filings, many of which are actually early warnings of deeper financial problems. You know, most of the homes in the area were built between 2019 and 2023, creating a pretty uniform housing stock. Now, with demand cooling off, there's some serious price competition happening. Inventory has shot up over 60%, and it's pretty common to see price cuts of $30,000 to $40,000 on homes that were originally listed around $400,000. Some builders are going even further, offering major incentives that are starting to push the entire market down. If you're a family that bought with a small down payment at the peak, you might be facing negative equity right now, which is tough. Let's not forget about remote work too. A lot of folks thought they'd be working from home all the time, but now, with more companies in the Dallas-Fort Worth area calling employees back to the office, the cost of gas, tolls, and lost time is really adding up. Suddenly, what seemed affordable just isn't stacking up anymore for many homeowners in places like Anna. They're having to compete with builders offering sweet deals and upgrades that regular sellers just can't match. It's a pretty stark reality for those families who thought they were living the dream. It's turned into a struggle to maintain a home that keeps losing value. Moving on to number 6, we've got Leander, right near Austin. This was once the go-to spot for folks priced out of the city, gaining recognition as one of the fastest growing cities in the country for years. But that growth was kind of built on some shaky ground, mainly cheap loans, and a serious misunderstanding about Texas property taxes. In Leander, the community stepped into a bit of a tax trap. When people first bought homes there, the prices looked tough but manageable. The real shocker came when the first full property tax bills started rolling in. Texas might not have a state income tax, but they sure make up for it with some of the steepest property taxes in the nation. Williamson County, where a chunk of Leander sits, is at the top of that list. Families who snagged homes for around $600,000 are now looking at annual tax bills reaching $15,000, $18,000, even $20,000. That's like adding $1,500 a month on top of a mortgage that was already pushing their budget to the limit. A report from the Texas Taxpayers and Research Association shows that effective tax rates in this area can often reach around 3%. It's no wonder many buyers didn't see that coming. Hey there, it's Alex Harper from Mortgage Monitor. Let's talk about what's happening in Leander, Texas. Things are pretty tense right now. A lot of homeowners are feeling stuck. They can't just hang on because their costs are skyrocketing, and selling isn't easy either since the market has shifted without them. To give you some perspective, data from Redfin shows nearly 1 in 4 people who bought a home in Leander in the last 2 years are now underwater, meaning they owe more on their loan than what they'd get if they sold the house today. Homes for sale are piling up, with overall inventory up more than 55%. It's not just the longtime residents struggling. Investors really drove the boom here. You had out-of-state buyers grabbing homes through video tours, aiming to rent them out right away. But now, those rentals are either sitting empty or renting for way less than they thought. With high taxes eating into rental income, many are deciding to cut their losses and sell off their properties fast. In some neighborhoods, you'll see whole streets with multiple rental houses hitting the market all at once. This rapid sell-off is putting a damper on property values for regular homeowners who weren't involved in the speculation. Leander is a tough reminder that owning a home costs more than just the mortgage. There are a lot of expenses that add up after tax season. Too many folks are discovering that the hard way, and it's putting their savings at risk. Now, let's move up the highway to Georgetown. This town was marketed as the perfect retirement dream in Texas, especially with the big Sun City development that attracted retirees from states like California and Illinois. They wanted to cash out and enjoy life in the hill country. But instead of relaxation, many retirees are now dealing with a real retirement headache. What's happening here is a clash between fixed incomes and rising costs. Retirees were drawn to Georgetown for its lower living costs, sunny weather, and strong community vibe. However, they didn't see the price of everything, like utilities, groceries, medical expenses, and property taxes, soaring all at once. During the boom years, counties kept reassessing home values, which sounds good, but leads to bigger tax bills. And just because the county says your home is worth more, it doesn't mean your pension or Social Security checks are doubling too. Local assessors are seeing more and more senior homeowners, many of whom have been in their houses for over 10 years, finding themselves in a tough spot financially. It's not that people are bad with money. They're just getting squeezed out of their own neighborhoods. The cost of living keeps rising, and a lot of folks find themselves unable to keep up with taxes. This pressure has really put a freeze on the market. Seniors who want to sell their homes and move to smaller places or assisted living can't find buyers at the prices they're aiming for. In Georgetown, for example, homes in age-restricted and active adult communities are sitting on the market for about 95 days on average. Buyers, especially those who are newly retired, are rethinking their plans. They can't just assume that selling a house in California for $1 million means they can easily buy a bigger place here because their previous home might have dropped in value too. The inventory in these senior-focused developments has shot up by over 40% compared to what's typical. Unfortunately, these properties don't really attract a lot of younger families, which limits the buyer pool and makes the market pretty shaky. A study by AARP's public policy arm pointed out that cities that rely heavily on retirees are some of the most vulnerable to economic downturns, and now Georgetown is living that reality. It's not just about property values changing. It feels like a well-planned retirement is collapsing, and time is running out for many to adjust. Now let's head over to Kyle, just south of Austin along the Interstate 35 corridor. Kyle and the nearby town of Buda have turned into a playground for iBuying experiments. Companies like Zillow, Opendoor, and OfferPad swooped into these neighborhoods during the real estate frenzy. They bought up thousands of homes without even seeing them, often paying more than regular buyers were willing to. But things didn't go as planned, and now we're seeing the fallout across Kyle. Between 2020 and 2022, those tech firms weren't walking around neighborhoods picking homes. Instead, they were relying on algorithms and buying properties in bulk, treating them like lines on a spreadsheet rather than homes where people actually live. Then the market shifted. Interest rates climbed, buyer interest dropped, and those finely tuned models just didn't work anymore. As a result, these companies were left with big portfolios of similar properties that they had bought at inflated prices. An independent analysis of the local market even found that at one point, over 15% of all homes were part of this mess. Hey there! Let's talk about some Texas suburbs that are really struggling when it comes to housing. First up is Kyle. You see, a lot of the homes listed for sale there were owned by these iBuyer companies, making them not just a part of the market, but the entire market. As things started going south, these companies began to sell off their homes as quickly as they could. It's wild to think that some houses bought at the peak for around $450,000 are now being sold for about $320,000. That's a whopping loss of $130,000 on a single home. They're taking these financial hits just to clear out their inventory. Now, if you're a regular homeowner living next door, this situation is pretty rough. How can you sell your house when a company is dumping almost the same model for 25% less than what you paid? You really can't. Just like that, your equity vanishes. Kyle has also become known for having one of the highest numbers of zombie listings in Texas. These are empty properties, often owned by out-of-state companies, that are slowly falling apart. And guess what? Those vacant homes are pulling down property values and appearances all around them. This isn't just a typical market correction. It's the aftermath of a tech company treating an entire town like a test subject. The companies can write off their losses and move on, but the folks in Kyle, they're left to deal with the repercussions. Next, we move to Pearland, which sits on the southern edge of Houston. This suburb used to be seen as a safe bet. With great schools and close access to the medical center, it felt reasonable compared to places further in the city. But that safety was a bit of a mirage because it overlooked a huge risk: the effects of climate on insurance. What's happening in Pearland is a real wake-up call for what happens when living there becomes too pricey to insure. You don't have to be right on the coast to feel the impacts of Gulf storms. Pearland has dealt with major floods from hurricanes and heavy rain, including some serious damage during Harvey. And guess what? Insurance companies are starting to pull back. Big names like Farmers and Allstate are placing restrictions on new homeowner policies in that area. Those still offering coverage have jacked up their prices to crazy levels. Homeowners are sharing their stories, backed by stats from the Texas Department of Insurance, revealing that premiums have doubled or even tripled in just a few years. We're talking about standard single-family homes now costing $6,000, $8,000, or more for insurance. It's a tough situation for these communities. You know, it's crazy how much extra costs can pile up when it comes to buying a home. Just think about the insurance. Adding even $10,000 a year can crank up your monthly expenses by over $500. It's pretty much like tacking on another $100,000 to your mortgage. And with the new federal flood maps and local drainage assessments, more homes are getting shoved into those official flood zones. That means you get hit with mandatory flood insurance on top of your regular coverage, which can add several $1,000s each year. Investors are definitely noticing these shifts. They're getting insurance quotes before they even make offers, and many are taken aback by the prices. This has led to a huge increase in housing supply while the demand has taken a nosedive. Inventory has jumped about 35%, but the number of buyers willing to dive in is shrinking. It's totally understandable that folks are hesitant to buy a place if they can't get a reasonable insurance rate in the coming year. Sellers are caught in a tough spot. They can't just lower the insurance costs or change the weather. Still, if they want to sell, they have to cut their prices. It's tough to have a solid housing market without stable and affordable insurance. Just look at what's going on in Pearland. That's what happens when that foundation starts to crumble. If you're living there, you probably know how wild the insurance quotes have been. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments if you're up for it. The numbers are pretty shocking. Now let's head over to Katy, west of Houston. It's this huge area filled with well-planned communities like Cinco Ranch, Grand Lakes, and Cane Island. Katy really grew as a kind of suburban fortress thanks to the energy industry. When oil and gas are booming, Katy flourishes, but when things get shaky in that sector, Katy definitely feels the effects quickly. Matt, 2 over x minus 10, Texas suburbs facing a total housing meltdown. Right now, we're not seeing a repeat of the 80s crash, but there's something else brewing that's just as concerning. The energy sector is going through a shift. Sure, profits can still look good, but companies aren't hiring like they used to in big waves. With automation and new tech coming into play, plus shareholders pushing for discipline, many businesses are doing more with fewer staff. Capital discipline might sound nice, but it usually means fewer jobs and more layoffs. This uncertainty spills over into the housing market. The Houston Association of Realtors shows that sales of higher-priced homes in Katy, especially those over $500,000, have dropped by nearly 30%. Meanwhile, inventory for those homes has skyrocketed by around 45%. You know, the housing market can really tip out of balance sometimes. Right now, we're seeing fewer buyers interested in higher-priced homes. Renters are feeling the pinch, too. A lot of families who could have bought those bigger homes in the past are opting to rent instead because they're not so sure about their job security these days. This switch in plans has caused luxury rental prices to go down, which is tough news for investors who were counting on solid rental income from those properties. Let's talk about Round Rock, which is a prime example of this. It's hard to watch because it wasn't expected to end up like this. Round Rock is home to big names like Dell and has been seen as a safe bet in the tech world, a reliable place to live that could handle any economic storm. Many folks thought it was untouchable, but it looks like that's not the case anymore. Right now, the housing market there is really struggling. The troubles in Round Rock align almost perfectly with the slowdown in the tech industry. For about 3 years, companies like Dell, Apple, and Tesla were booming and adding tons of jobs. People were in bidding wars, even for average-sized homes, and it wasn't unusual to see someone shelling out $1 million for a 2,000 square foot place. But then things started to change. Since the start of 2023, tech companies have been laying off workers in waves instead of one big lump. Each round of layoffs is leading to more people considering putting their homes on the market. The numbers from the Austin Board of Realtors are shocking. The median home price in Round Rock has plummeted by over 20% from its peak. That's the quickest drop we've seen in any major Texas suburb. You know, it's wild to see the reality for so many homeowners right now. Zillow's done some digging and found that over 30% of people who bought homes in the last 2 years are actually underwater on their mortgages. Basically, they owe more than what their houses could sell for right now. And get this, inventory has shot up by more than 150% since the recent lows, which means both builders and current homeowners are facing a ton of competition. To move their houses, some new communities are pulling out all the stops with crazy incentives. I'm talking about offers like free cars, 2 years of prepaid association dues, and financing deals that almost look like no-interest loans. It really shows you how worried builders are about sitting on unsold homes. They'll do just about anything to sell. When those discounted homes are sold, it resets the value for the neighborhood to a lower level. So imagine you list your house today, and 2 months later, you finally get an offer. That offer will be based on a weaker market than when you first listed it. Take Round Rock, for instance. It's a prime example of a suburb that got inflated by hype rather than real-world fundamentals. It thrived on cheap money and the idea that tech growth would keep skyrocketing forever. But that notion has been shattered. The whole Texas miracle story seems like it's hit a wall. What I've noticed on my travels is that this isn't just a small slowdown. From empty new developments in North Dallas to unexpected tax hikes around Austin and rising insurance costs near Houston, a lot of the Texas housing scene is feeling the strain. These suburbs relied too much on a good vibe rather than solid long-term factors. They were banking on hype, ridiculously low interest rates, and the risky idea that prices only ever go up. Now it's important to note that Texas isn't completely collapsing. Many areas are still pretty stable. But if you own a home or you're thinking about buying in the places I've just checked out, it's time to wake up to the reality. You're not in a seller's paradise anymore. This is a fragile market where things can shift fast. If this breakdown helped clear things up for you, give that like button a tap, share this video with anyone you know in Texas, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future insights. Your support is what keeps us uncovering the stories behind the headlines. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to stay informed and make wise.